Unmute. Then share sound. And hey, gentlemen, now we're good. I would like to apologize and say sorry for the delay, but let's say a short word of prayer. Father God, I thank you for all of us. You created us as men, and you had a purpose for us in life. Today you have gathered us here for a purpose, to speak to us. Lord, as we speak also to one another, we pray that your Spirit will lead us and speak to us in very, very individual ways. We give this meeting to you. Be glorified in everything. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you. We need you. We need one another. We need one another. So share the DVD. This is the very first of 24 lessons, and this is called At the Starting Line. Follow the lesson with your handout. As this gentleman come in to speak to us, then we out.
Well, thank you for that very warm round of applause. Let me tell you, it is a thrilling thing for me to be joined with literally hundreds of you here this morning to join me on a manhood journey that we call the Quest for Authentic Manhood. I tell you, isn't this exciting? Wasn't it exciting for you to walk in here and see literally hundreds and hundreds of men, probably 1,200 men here in the auditorium here today? And that is an absolute thrill. And the thing that thrills me the most is that you're here to be better men. And that's an exciting thing because the world needs better men. Not too long ago, I heard a story about a man who was in his attic and he came across a lamp. And he was dusting off the lamp. It happened to be the proverbial lamp with the genie in it. The genie popped out, said to the man, "I'm going to give you one wish. What do you want?" And he began to think about that, and he had always wanted to go to Hawaii, but he was deathly afraid of water. So his request was that the genie would build him a bridge from Los Angeles to Honolulu. And the genie threw down the wand and said, "I cannot believe you asked for that. I mean, come on, you could have had all the money that you ever wanted in the world. You could have had all the power, all the fame, all the intelligence. And besides, that's a lot of concrete. And you asked for a bridge." And the guy said, "Well, I guess I see what you mean." He said, "Okay, can I ask for something else?" And the genie said, "Yeah, what is it?" "I'd like to understand the feminine mind." And the genie said, "You want to make that bridge 2 lanes or 4? Well, I want you to know I'm not brave enough to tackle the feminine mind, but I am excited about tackling the masculine life. And that's us, a group of men who are here together on an adventure, wanting to discover how to be better men, wanting to unwrap, in a sense, our masculinity in a way that would encourage us to live up, not down. Now, I want you to know you're going to need some gear along the way. Anytime you're on a journey, men love gear, and anytime you're on a journey, you're going to need some gear. And the gear that you're going to need are these 3 things. First of all, you're going to need toughness. Now, I don't know what you felt like today trying to get into the parking lot with so many cars and it being dark out there, but let me tell you, it was easier today than it'll ever be. Because when it gets to be wintertime and it's dark and it's cold and it's rainy, it's going to be tough to get up at 5:30 or 5 o'clock or whatever time you have to get up in order to be here. So it's going to require some toughness on your part to be here. Secondly, it's going to require some willingness on your part, some specific willingness on your part to be real with other men. If you want to get the most out of this men's fraternity, when we break up into our small groups, you're going to have to open up your life to other men around the subject matter that we've talked about in order to process the material that we're going to be discussing. And that for you will be the most valuable moment of the day. And lastly, it's going to require courage. And that is the courage that's going to be required for you to examine in a very close way your life as a man. It is hard sometimes for men to open up their chest and look inside and see what's there. And yet there's a lot boiling right underneath the surface. But I want to encourage you to be courageous and take a hard look at your life as a man. One thing I'm going to promise you, though, if you take the gear and finish the whole trip with us, is that this can be and will be for some the most exciting year of your life. That's what we've discovered in men's fraternity for the last 13 years, and I'm expecting to be just as exciting this year. Recently, I got this list of strange facts, and here are some strange facts to consider. A duck's quack doesn't echo, and no one knows why. 35% of the people who use personal ads for dating services are already married. Only 1 person in 2 billion will live to be 116 years or older. It's possible to lead a cow upstairs but not downstairs. A snail can sleep for 3 years. No word in the English language rhymes with month. The average lifespan of a Major League Baseball, 7 pitches. All polar bears are left-handed. Americans on average eat about 18 acres of pizza every day. It's physically impossible for you to lick your elbow. Before this day is over, anyone who hears that it's physically impossible to lick your elbow will try to lick their elbow. But here's the strangest fact of all. Even though there is about 4 billion men on the planet, most men cannot tell you what a man is. Not succinctly, not compellingly, not with a sense of empowerment that makes you want to live up as a man. Most of us do not have that kind of core definition of masculinity for our lives that drive us and sustain us in everyday life. Now, we're going to be talking about the quest for authentic manhood in particular here in just a moment. What I'd like to do for just a second, especially for those of you who are just joining with us for the first time, is give you an overview of men's fraternity in general, because men's fraternity is a 3-year program. And you have that on your outline, and let me just show you how men's fraternity falls out over the course of 3 years. First of all, we call it Men's Fraternity 1, Men's Fraternity 2, and Men's Fraternity 3. And the name of Men's Fraternity 1, which you're in right now, is called The Quest for Authentic Manhood. It's kind of a foundational level of the study of masculinity. Men's Fraternity 2 is called A Man at Work and at Home. It speaks to those key issues in a man's life. And then Men's Fraternity 3 is called A Man in His World. It's looking forward in his life of what's in the future for him. We called it last year The Great Adventure. And there were some 1,200 men who participated with us last year in The Great Adventure. The focus of Men's Fraternity 1 is a man's core identity. The focus of Men's Fraternity 2 is a man's chief responsibilities, those 2 supreme pursuits in a man's life called his career and his woman. And in Men's Fraternity 3, the focus is a man's chosen destiny. Not the destiny that's chosen for him, but if he's a courageous adventurer, he chooses his own personal destiny and lives his life according to the standards that he's considered and he's picked out, so that the world isn't shaping him into its own mold. The chief elements of Men's Fraternity 1, which we'll be going through, is a man's wounds. It's looking kind of at the past that shaped or sometimes misshapen him. And we'll be talking about that in the weeks to come. We also come up with that compelling definition of manhood that I told you 4 billion men on the planet have a hard time coming up with. And then we overview and look at and pick at a few of a man's primary issues. Men's Fraternity 2, it's how a man engages his work and how a man relates successfully to a woman. And then in Men's Fraternity 3, what we do is we help men rediscover what I think is the great adventure for their life, because many men fall into a rut and miss that great adventure. They get off track somewhere along the road of life. Men's Fraternity 3 is to help them to come back to that place where they discover not only how uniquely they're created, their unique design, but also the great adventure, and we help them develop a satisfying life focus. The major challenge in Men's Fraternity 1 is a phrase that you're going to hear a little later on, and that is, the boy in you must die. There is a transition that has to take place in a man's life where he moves from boyhood to manhood. And if that isn't a very specific transition in his life, then even as he grows older, he still relates more to boyishness than to noble manhood. And there are many men walking around in bodies 40, 50, 60 years old who are still boys, not men. So the boy in you must die. Men's Fraternity 2, it's the man in you must step forward. And in Men's Fraternity 3, the adventurer in you must live. The passion of Men's Fraternity 1 is seizing your manhood. And that's what we're going to be talking about, seizing your manhood. And that requires some specific steps of action for you. Men's Fraternity 2, it's establishing your manhood. Men's Fraternity 3, it's maximizing your manhood. Now, as you look at this chart, what I want you to know about the chart is just simply this. Men's Fraternity 1 is kind of the foundation of a man's house. Men's Fraternity 2 are the walls. Men's Fraternity 3 is the ceiling to authentic manhood. And hopefully you can stay with us, not only this year, but in the years to come, to finish this adventure that we call authentic manhood. For some of you today, it's going to be the beginning of laying a new foundation for your manhood. For some of you throughout the year, you've already laid your foundation, but there's some cracks in it. And so throughout the year, as we discuss your manhood, we're going to fill in some of those cracks to help it become a more solid foundation. But that's kind of the overview, the big picture of the 3 years of Men's Fraternity. Now, we're back in year 1. And year 1 is called The Quest for Authentic Manhood. And what I'd like to do this morning is start by just giving you 5 of the presuppositions that I'm going to be working off of that will help you understand where I'm coming from as we walk through this material. So here's 5 basic presuppositions I'm going to be bringing to this particular manhood journey. The first is this: manhood is in a state of confusion. That's going to be one of my basic and most fundamental premises. Manhood is in a state of confusion. I mean, how else do you explain why men just a few years ago suddenly began to move into the woods and yelled and screamed and sweat and beat drums and acted foolish in a lot of ways, looking for some kind of inner mystical warrior? Remember guys doing that just a few years ago? How else do you explain the thousands of African American men who jumped on buses and planes and trains and rushed to Washington, D.C. when Louis Farrakhan said, we're going to have a 1,000,000-man march? How else do you explain the thousands of men who fill arenas and stadiums annually to go to a Promise Keepers event? And how else do you explain this? Over 1,000 men here in this room here today. What does that all mean? You know what I think it means? I think it means right below the surface of men's lives, there's confusion. And there's a lack of confidence as to what it really means to be a man. I remember a few years ago talking to a Princeton University researcher. This particular researcher dealt with marketing products to different demographic groups. And his particular specialty was marketing products to young men. And I remember the statement he made to me. He said this. He said, Robert, today's young men, particularly those 25 and younger in the United States, are nearing a state of masculine meltdown. They have no clear identity as to their masculinity or what it means to be a man. They're drifting. And underneath the surface of their life is confusion. In the early 1990s, I noticed that even among our peers. That's part of how this material was developed. I heard guys talking about things that they couldn't quite put their finger on, but it was an unsettledness and a restlessness that I could see in their lives. In fact, what we did here at the church is we brought some men together in little focus groups and just had them talk. And I wanted to hear what was going on. And there were 3 words that kept coming up, or 3 phrases that I kept hearing from them about their lives. One was, and they didn't necessarily express it just this way, but this is what I heard. They expressed disappointment with life. They would tell me that, they got out of college with all these expectations about life becoming more thrilling, and as they moved through life, it just simply became more heavy. And the things that were fun in their life seemed to drain out. There seemed to be a heaviness of responsibility. And when they hit about 40 or 45, it seems like they just kind of hit the wall. All the things that were promised to them early on that would give them life, once they had obtained those things, they didn't really deliver life. And so a disappointment, a malaise had kind of settled in over their spirits. And they weren't really sure what to do about it. They only knew they felt it. Another word I heard from men was the word pain. Underneath the surface of men's lives, there's a lot of pain that they haven't resolved. And they don't know how to talk about it because they look at the guys around them, and those guys seem like they're doing all right. They seem like they have it together, but underneath their life, there's pain. Some of that pain relates to their dads and unresolved issues there. Some of that pain relates to their dreams and things that never came to fruition, that they always hoped for and wished for and wanted, but it never came about. Some of it had to do with failures in their life, things that they had messed up and screwed up, and they didn't know how to go back and fix it or get over it. There was pain there that they needed to talk about, but they didn't know who to talk to. Another word I heard was loneliness. Isn't it amazing that we're in a world today where we're wired everywhere? We can talk to anybody. We have access everywhere. And yet, with the increase in technology, there has been a decrease in intimacy. We really know people less and less. And in today's society, men in particular are lonely. They know everybody, but no one knows them. No one has access to their life, and they're not sure how to get out and get connected in a way that would be satisfying to them. I tell you all that because men are in a state of confusion. Secondly, I believe confused men, those kind of confused men will create major problems in life. I don't think most of us need to be told that. All we have to do is watch TV or read a magazine or read the newspaper or hear the latest statistics from the government, and we will find that most of the social problems in our society, for whatever reason, seems to rest at the feet of men. For some reason, as strong as we are a fragile bunch. We are. And most of the marriage problems that we experience in our world today oftentimes are men problems. And I'm speaking as a pastor of 30 plus years, and I can tell you that's the facts. When you go to statistics, what you'll find is most kids today who are truant or who have problems also have absent dads or deadbeat dads. 90% of all the major crimes in the United States are from men. 100% of all the rapes are from men. 95% of all the burglaries are from men. 91% of all the offenses against family or children come from men. 94% of all drunken drivers are men. You know, it got so bad in the 90s with these statistics rolling out that Time magazine put this cover on the front page of its magazine. And it says, "Are men really that bad?" I remember looking at that and I go, what's wrong with us? I think it's because confused men create major problems. After a lifetime of research, world-famous anthropologist Margaret Mead said these words. She made this observation as she spanned human history in different cultures and different societies. She said, the central problem of every society is to define appropriate roles for its men. That's the central problem. And why do men need clear direction and appropriate roles? It's because we're a fragile group. And without clear direction, without clear understanding of who we are and what we're intended to do, confused men create major problems. Thirdly, I believe confused men also settle for less in their life. Psychologist Rollo May picked up on this a generation ago. This was in the 50s when he made this statement, but here's what he said. The clearest picture of an empty life is the suburban man who gets up at the same hour every weekday morning, takes the same train to work in the city, performs the same task at the office, lunches at the same places, leaves the same tip for the waitress, comes home on the same train each night, spends a 2-week vacation at the shore every summer, which he does not enjoy, goes to church but does not really know why he goes, and moves through a routine mechanical existence year after year until he finally retires at age 65 and very soon thereafter dies of heart failure, possibly brought on by repressed anger, though I always have the suspicion that he dies of boredom. That was a view of a psychologist years ago. And one of the observations I've made, though you may not live even in Little Rock, and you don't necessarily take a train, and you don't necessarily vacation at the seashore. But the point is this, many confused men, in whatever setting, settle into an empty rut in their life because they don't know what else to live for. Guys, do you understand how oftentimes we're programmed? About college age, we think we've got this job we're supposed to have, and money we're supposed to make, and things we're supposed to have, and a wife we're supposed to marry. And we move into that thinking because we've been told if we have all those things, we'll be alive. And what happens is we move into that process, kind of like on a conveyor belt, and we move into what I call a standardized manhood process. And after a while, we don't like it. But we don't know what to do about it. And we have no higher calling on our life other than ourself. And that doesn't satisfy. Confused men settle for less. Fourth, I believe there is no lofty vision of manhood today that's compelling to men. The kind of manhood that calls men up. Several years ago, a frustrated young man wrote me this following poem. He said this, "What is a man? Is he someone who's strong and tall? Or is he taunt and talented as he plays ball? Is he someone who is hardened enough, who smokes and drinks and swears enough? Is he someone who chases women hard with a quest to conquer, but without dropping his guard? Is he someone with a good business mind, who gets ahead of the others with his nose to the grind? Or is he someone who tries his best while not really caring for any of the rest? What is a man? Does anyone know? Tell me, who is the prototype? To whom shall I go?" I think there are a lot of young men today, maybe not expressing it that way, but at the core of their existence, they're saying, who is the prototype of real manhood? And to whom shall we go? In 1 Corinthians 13, the Apostle Paul makes this statement. He says, "When I was a child, I used to speak as a child, and think as a child, and reason as a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish things." You know, for years I read that verse, and there was something captivating about that verse. There was something that pulled me towards that verse. I wanted to go into that verse. In fact, I wanted to get with Paul Because he made this statement, but when I became a man, and I wanted to stop him there and say, how did you do that? How did you become a man? And when you became a man, you said you put away childish things. What were those things that you put away? And what new things did you embrace? And Paul, did they give you life? I know I had fun when I was a kid. Can you have fun as a man? Is there a better calling than childhood and boyishness? Is there something to pull me up to a higher mountain where the challenges are just as thrilling and the view is just as magnificent and even more so? Can you get me there? That's what I wanted to know. I want to know how to become a man. I want to know what real men do and how they feel and how they act. But it doesn't seem anyone knows today how to answer that question. What is a man? Which leads me to my premise number 5, and it's this. I believe the Bible has helpful insights to all of the above, to all the other 4 presuppositions. Now, I'm aware, by the way, that there are all kinds of men here in the audience today. Some of you are Baptist, some of you are Episcopal, some of you are Jews, some of you are Catholics, some of you come from a very mixed bag. We'll just call you Metho-Bapterians, okay? You come from everywhere. You've had all kinds of mixture in your past. And that's okay. There are some of you here who are non-churchgoers. In fact, there are some of you here who today who are cynical about religion altogether. And quite frankly, if you and I sat down and talked for a little while, there'd probably be some really good reasons why you're cynical. Let me put you all at ease just for a moment. I have no religious axes to grind here. You're not going to hear me do that. I'm not going to cram my religion down your throat. This is a manhood journey, not a church service. Aren't you glad about that? This is a manhood journey. As Bill said, no offerings, no plea for church memberships. We're not going to hawk anything. The only reason we're here is because we want to help you become better men. And I think that's why you're here as well. Now, I'm going to use the Bible from time to time, and I'm going to use it because it's great literature, first of all. Secondly, it has time-tested wisdom in it that's been proven out over the ages. And thirdly, it's because we need its help. We really do. So these are my 5 presuppositions. Manhood is in a state of confusion. Confused men create major problems. Confused men settle for less. There's no lofty vision of manhood calling us up. I mean, really, do you watch commercials today? Because they speak to our culture. And you know what you see about manhood when you look into the face of commercials? You see the doofus standing there with his tennis racket getting hit in the head with the ball. You see the other guy in the beer commercial looking past these women mesmerized by a bottle of beer. That's manhood in the 21st century. And let me tell you, I laugh too, but when I look at the pain in our world, I stop laughing. Because behind that is a vacuum that's killing us. And we want to go up, don't we? We want to go up. And I think the Bible is going to help us get there, as well as the other material that we'll be talking about in the next few weeks. Now, what I'd like to do for just a moment to get us started on our journey, I want to look at some of the historical roots of our present crisis in masculinity. And basically, there are 3 events I want to just touch on just for a moment. The first, if you look on your outline, is the Industrial Revolution that occurred at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, why is the Industrial Revolution important? Because at that moment, 100 years ago, the Industrial Revolution dramatically changed the family. Large numbers of dads, for the first time, began to leave home for work. They used to stay on the farm and work, but now they leave home and they go out into the dark in the early morning hours to a factory. And with that move, the side-by-side relationship that dads naturally had with their sons was broken for the first time. Up until that point, a young man would get up and kind of live his life next to a nurturing dad. He would see his dad in the best hours of his day. He would see his dad's heroism out on the farm, or his creativity, or his work ethic, or whatever else, because he was next to his dad. But with the Industrial Revolution, all that stopped. Now when he got up in the morning, many times his dad wasn't there. And when his dad came home, he came home exhausted at the end of the day, and all he had left was a few meager tidbits for the family. In fact, many times what came home at the end of the day was an exhausted, tired, grumpy dad who wanted to be left alone. And some of you grew up in a home just like that. Mom, not dad, was left to head up the family, and in many cases, she did it heroically. But a son's world became a world in which he was shaped by women. Mom was there all the time for him, but she was a woman. He went to school, in an elementary school that was probably taught at least 1st through 6th grade by women. When he went to Sunday school on Sunday, his class was probably taught by a woman. His world was shaped by women. And as for his masculinity, it was what boys made up together because dads weren't there. And that boyish definition of masculinity is what they began to take out into their adult life. And it was anything but noble. But that's all that they knew. Sociologist Alan Carlson, who was president of the Rockford Institute, which is a think tank in Illinois, made this observation. He said, "Today, we are at the end of the deconstruction of patriarchy, which has been going on since the turn of the 20th century. And that's because the industrial age impacted manhood. The second major event was World War II, which further added to the disconnect between fathers and sons. You know, World War II changed a generation of men. And probably no book expresses that better than one that I read this summer by Tom Brokaw, called The Greatest Generation. And you know what? When you read this book, you begin to think of these men as the greatest generation. Because what they did is they exchanged their youth for war. And their supreme virtues that they carried with them their whole life was sacrifice and duty. And they brought those back from the war, and because of that, they made the United States the greatest nation on earth. But here's what I want you to know about where we are today. What worked for these men in war did not work well with the family. Most sons of World War II veterans felt that their dads worked too much, took their fathering too lightly, and disconnected from them, especially emotionally. And I think there was good reason for that, because I think if you're a man in a war, you have to disconnect from your emotions, and it's hard to reconnect. And they brought back that disconnect, and all they knew was to work hard, and they did. But they didn't connect, oftentimes, especially with their sons. So the industrial age took dad away from the home. It created distant dads, but World War II took many dads out of their sons' lives emotionally and created disconnected dads. And then came a third sweeping event in the 1970s, what I'll call feminism. Now, feminism is a great social movement that has recast all of human society, or American society, in the last 40 years. And feminism originally sought equality for women with men, and that's a good thing, because women are equal with men. But over time, feminism's quest for equality also became the pursuit of sameness, and that's not a good thing. And it's left us as men terribly confused, because now we're not sure how to act anymore. We're not sure what our role is. In fact, there's even a question of whether men even have a role. And what's unique about a man? No one seems willing or courageous enough to want to answer that. And anybody that's brave enough to even broach the subject is punished by society for trying to break out of this sameness direction that our culture seems bent on pursuing. So it leaves men confused, because in a world of sameness, no one seems to know for sure just what a man is, and that's devastating. And the reason it's devastating is because we're back to Margaret Mead's quote. The role of every society is to find appropriate roles for the men. But if they have no roles, then they're left adrift. And so here we are as men on the front end of the 21st century, after experiencing a century of distant dads and a half century of disconnected dads and a generation of social chaos with women, and you finally come to the place and you go, no wonder we're confused. We're not sure about anything, really, in our life. And what we need is some help. Now let me finish up just making what I think are some bold promises to you if you stick it out with me over the course of the whole year. And I really hope that you do. Because if you do this, I think I can deliver on these 5 promises. Let me mention them to you real quickly. First of all, you will have a clear definition of manhood. Remember at the beginning we said, most men can't tell you succinctly with a compelling kind of passion what a man is. If you'll stick with me, I can promise you this. You will leave here with a definition of manhood that you're excited about. And not only excited about living your life for, and excited about telling your sons about. That's the kind of definition we want to craft together in our time together. Secondly, you will develop a new manhood language. You see, in our modern culture, we don't have that language. And because we don't have a language, our souls kind of stay starved for some substance about real manhood issues. And without that kind of substance, what we end up doing is we end up talking about our boat, or the Razorbacks, or the Volunteers, or the Longhorns, or about our business, and we stay right here on the surface. But we never talk about anything of destiny. Soulish kind of stuff that feeds the masculine soul. We have to build new bridges to one another. And those new bridges are built on a manhood language. And so over the course of this year, you're going to hear terms like servant leader and feminized man and rejecting passivity and leading courageously. You're going to hear about conventional manhood and manhood ceremonies and manhood wounds and things like that. You're going to hear phrases like, the boy in you must die. You're going to hear other phrases like, the king in you is what decides. Or if you're not being admired by another man, you're being hurt every day. And when you hear those phrases with one another, when you hear that this guy needs to unpack, you'll know exactly what you're talking about. And the other man you're telling it to will know exactly what you're saying. And that creates bridges of depth into the masculine soul that helps us live up rather than down. That's what men's fraternity can do for you, and I think I can deliver on that. Thirdly, you will make some significant personal discoveries about yourself. There's a lot, as I've said, about manhood that lies right beneath the surface of men's lives. But you know what we have on us? We have a lid on. Just like streets have those manhole covers, we have our own manhole cover over our lives because it's scary down under there. And sometimes if you watch government workers who tend our streets, they have a special instrument to pull that manhole cover up because otherwise you can't pry it up. It's just too heavy. I think that's the way it feels for a lot of men's lives. It's just too heavy to get that off so I can look inside. I think what men's fraternity becomes is the tool to help you pull the lid open and look inside. And though it may seem fearful at first, what I want you to know, it's the keys that are down in there to unlock your life. And that's why we need to get down in there and find them. Because they can open up a whole new adventure for you. And I think over the course of this year, you will make some exciting discoveries, some significant ones about yourself. Fourth, you will make some new friends here who are pursuing a common goal. And you'll do that both in the large group and in the small group, but I want to particularly reinforce what Bill said about the small group. You need to be in a small group. And if you're in a small group, and if you're you have the courage to open up your life and take a look inside and be willing to reveal yourself to other men, there are going to be some new connections made with other men. Some of the greatest friendships in life over the last 13 years started in men's fraternity. Just guys talking to one another, getting to know one another, being encouraged by one another. So I want to really encourage you to go into the small groups and be a part of that. Most men tell us at the end of men's fraternity that that was the most meaningful thing that they did. They joined a small group and they began to connect with men at a deeper level. And then the last thing is that you will have your own personalized plan for achieving authentic manhood. Now, Bill said we're not going to take an offering and we're not going to hawk the church or anything else, but I am going to ask you to do one thing. I'm willing to work for you for 23 weeks, but I need you to do one thing for me. Over the course of the year, we're going to give you this. In fact, I'll explain this in 2 weeks to you. Your manhood plan. Because the thing that we're trying to do is establish a new manhood identity for every man in here. But to do that, you need to do that work for yourself. You need to have your own personal plan for manhood. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to give you the sheet, and then you're going to use this as a draft all year to take the things that you're hearing week to week in men's fraternity, and you're going to process it for your life. It's going to ask you to look back on your life and what shaped you as a man. It's going to ask you to take a good evaluation of what you're doing right now. It's going to ask you to think about where you want to end up in life. And then to put all of that down and keep refining it. And at the end of the year, we're actually going to ask you to type it up and share it with the men in your group. And I'm going to ask you to give me a copy because that's what's going to be required to graduate here. All right? Every man's got to turn in a plan to me. But this plan can be the most profitable thing in your life if you're willing to take a hard look at your life. Men need to know where they're going. And when they know where they're going, they become a very positive and powerful force, not only in their own lives, but in their family's life and in the community. And that's what we want to help you achieve, a plan for your life. Okay? So, 5 presuppositions I've given you here this morning that's going to shape my messages. And then 5 promises that I think I can deliver on if you're willing to stick with me throughout the whole year. Men, welcome to men's fraternity and welcome to the quest for authentic manhood.
There we go, guys. I know we started late. Once again, I want to apologize. But I want to let you know this is a very good what I need. Then we told here that man is in a to be confused. Because to ask questions there. Questions is why do you choose yeah. But there was not that recommendation.
it's still maybe, more training, maybe training that I've had pushed aside. I mean, I've led men's group before, so a lot of this stuff I've seen. And I don't know if it's just I guess relapsing from moving back in to help my parents out, being around my dad. It's hard to know this stuff already, but to not follow it out of anger or frustration.
To be the best me I
Yeah, discoveries and the manhood plan.
Yeah.
I think more things about me and what is it that I want to do.
Relationship.
To accept that society society is important, and there is that sense of responsibility and obligation, especially to other men, to help encourage each other, provide just the environment, quote unquote safe space to be able to have real conversations, find out why is it that being a man today in today's society seems to be very difficult. I see it firsthand. I believe there is an attack on manhood, and trying to find out. It's easier being a man because, like what was mentioned, our roles were defined. So it was easier, the man, he went to work and he provided and he worked hard, the wife stayed home, she was able to take care of the children and sources home and, takes care of the family that way. But, in today's society, that interdependency on those roles that defined us, the lines have been so blurred now. So, what defines you as a man today in today's society seems to be, you become almost obsolete, and so because of that, yes, it makes it extremely hard to know how to navigate through the culture and society today. So, same, offer the invitation, but and I have to accept it, but I understand and understood and forward to again being a part of this and being support and advocate
Yeah. So it comes from a biblical tradition. You look at the first man, who actually did God had planned. And then through verse, he put that man all by himself. It- You know, this because God actually put everything that he did, trees, plants, you know, water, and then he put them. And but yeah, like, he gave him a phone. So of course, I think man was created fast and woman to expect. So this woman never comes and walks with the man as a helper. How come when the feminine woman came about, the woman tell the man what to do? I believe that. But if you see that it doesn't you find it wrong with the law. He was right there when the enemy. And when the enemy attacked the woman, you hear saying, you can't. It is about you. And this is your what do what you are. This is not about great. I'm doing this every Sunday. Every month I'm waiting for them to do it. Every Sunday. For 90 minutes. And I have another so the books are here. This is the first one here. It's called The Quest for Authentic Manhood. This is the second book. It's called yeah. Yes, but become with us as a fight of the right call. We discover here and out. Tomorrow. So I have given myself college ministry. Yes, it is ministry. I've given myself 90 minutes to spend here in America every Saturday. This guy is something called men's and it's full and thousand men. Lots of this. Whatever he was doing, the word is it was like station of life. No more sugar denying by 6 stations being passed.
is to discover and to acquire us knowledge about about money. I don't want to make mistakes that come in. Maybe I want to go the wrong. Like, I want to leave and I mean like when the it is very something about this I know. Time I want to use very there's a lot about this that by the time you get stuff everyone not me he gave five I think he gave five there are five pieces of religion different there on the line and people I don't want to be confused, I don't want to cause confusion, I don't want to make I don't want to miss this is why either that's exactly what you said. I know you have two more. You want them to bring you again? If it don't discover something that you that's why we are doing this one. So then there are five promises. Those promises are recorded today. One language, you make a significant discovery, secondly, you make significant personal discoveries about yourself, you make friends, have a personal life. Question, which of these five promises? Which one is most significant? To know that I'm not trying to be this group here. I believe you have five. So I that's like
Number one, just giving it clear definition of
yeah.
um, there's anything I believe that's the biggest thing. But of course, you know, actually, me personally, I'm old and certain results, you know, they're looking for as a result of what looking as a so for me, it's you know when things when I don't get the type of results that I expected based off my actions, then you know, that's not truly there. Discover who I am for the plan. Once you discover who you are and what you should be doing, okay, now what's your plan? What are you going to do now?
Yeah. I think this was.
They have a whole separate website now. Yeah, it's called mensfraternity.com, and they're changing a lot of the books over. That's when I text you back, I told you they said the books wouldn't be in for 5 weeks. But they're not offering those old books anymore. I think it's all been changed for the program. It's, it looks like they still show those books, but then there's also, yeah, yeah.
It takes all of us. Guys, you know what Amazon was doing? Amazon, discovered this book is no longer available and men are looking. And this is the book for them.
Looks like they are still offering it, even though some are order, but they're also, a lot of it has to do with the study three series.
So, you're
Yeah, just have it all.
the reason I was asking you for your number, we communicate on a WhatsApp for me. If you let me put your name on the Manhood photo. Even for these guys that I will have with me, that's where I know that it goes to the link. But you would have to have the WhatsApp, you know, have the WhatsApp, maybe download on your phone so that you can.
Yeah, I said one, I'm gonna.
There, let men know.
$9.95.
Oh, nine, that's the price,
Well, I'm on their website.
but that is exactly what the function.
Yeah, $9.95 back ordered for 5 weeks.
But
When at home is $9.95 as well. That looks like it's a, they're open now, so work well. And then, the Great Adventure is. They're just offering CDs and DVDs.
if you can get a copy, if the man is down, I can't give you any longer. You don't want it, send it to. From that,
I did put both links in what's that?
this lesson. So so grateful that you came and when it is that you yeah. Yeah. Because next time, one of the group, then we follow that. Thank you. So, you're free to here so that you can have it next time. But thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. I don't think that now we need to. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I just dropped the motion. And robotics. And might not go there. Okay. So I was trying to record this. Where did it go? Oh, there.